Well, thank you, Ron, and thank you all. I didn't know I was coming to this kind of an oration, but I appreciate it. I appreciate it very, very much. It has not been an effort, in a sense, a lot of work, but being at WPI all these years and being advisor to CAP now for just about right 60 years has been a highlight of my life. There's no question about it. And I kind of fell into it. And it just sort of happened. I'd like to welcome you all here, my friends. This is the largest reunion Phi Kappa Theta ever has, and probably almost any fraternity has had. This has been fantastic. And I also want to welcome our many guests tonight who have been so helpful in so many ways to helping us get started, come out of the ditch. They didn't help us get in, we did that. But it's been a tremendous relationship. I'd just like to take a couple minutes to look back at how we got here tonight. It has not been a steady upward hill climb by any means. It's been a very interesting joggy ride. We came in late to the fraternity system. Fraternity started in, I think it was 91. 1891 with Phi Kappa. I get my, it's not the decades that bother me, it's the century. It's the fact that it started in 1891 with Phi Kappa. And we didn't appear on the scene until quite a bit later. And because in those days, Catholics, which many of my friends were not accepted in college fraternities. It wasn't WPI, it wasn't anything else. It was the fact the national fraternities of those years, and before World War II, there was a lot of intolerance, a lot of status difficulties with fraternity systems, and a lot of other things. Some of them quite vicious in the South. At any rate, during that period, almost no Roman Catholics were in any of WPI's fraternities. There were a few excellent football players of Polish extraction whose fraternities got them accepted through the national by such alterations as changing Woodskowski's to Wilson's. So it happens, you know, but I wasn't one of them, so I didn't change Grogan to anything. So what they did was sort of long. And finally, around the early 30s, some Catholic kids decided, yeah, they'd like to have this kind of fun of being in a fraternity too. So they formed a little group, and appropriate enough, called it the Friars, which a lot of you are familiar with. And they were local, and they lived in an attic. There were about 6 to 10 of them over on Trowbridge Street in a house owned by one of the members' families. That's the way they began, that's what it was. And then we had 2 faculty members who were Catholics. They took an interest in him, and they knew a Dr. Burns, who was a dentist, who was a Holy Cross alumnus, and he knew a lot of patients, of course, who were Holy Cross alumnus. And he persuaded them to put down $2,000 each for collateral for a house, which was addressed, was 26 Institute Road. And so they put down the collateral, which bought the house, which we bought in 1935. And that's when we were chartered. And it is still our house. But the road to today was really rough. And it wasn't just the ambient situation in Worcester, but it was an ambient situation in the entire country. There were good years and bad years. We got started in the 30s. The 30s were the worst decade you could imagine. It was desperate, desperate poverty, enormous depression. There was all kinds of crime, and just a terrible place. And the fraternities barely made it. In WPI, barely made it. It was a very rough period. And it continued around right through that decade until on December 2nd, December 1941, Pearl Harbor came. And with it, the world changed. It was total war. Unlike these kind of wars we're fighting now, which are tough, awful, and generally mean, without some purpose or direction. World War II was very clear. It was either the Japanese or the Germans were going to run the world, or it was all over. So we went into immediate and total draft. And out of that, colleges took a terrible beating. And fraternities were consumed. They were gone. And only a few fraternities and engineering colleges existed. Because in our case, we had an admiral, Admiral Walker Tyler Culverius was the president of the college, but we also had some work with the military, mainly the Navy, and the Navy, who were absolutely convinced the fight with the Germans and Japanese was just the beginning. The real war was coming with the Russians about 4 years later. They're convinced of that. And we were behind in technology at the beginning. And we had technology, but it wasn't radar and sonar and the kinds of electronics and propulsion systems the other countries had. So they put a lot into the development of engineering programs. I graduated from high school in 1942. On September 23rd, I enrolled in WPI, and on the 24th, I went to Boston and enrolled in the Navy as a seaman. Because they had a program you could finish the year you were in, but because the Navy was so concerned this war was going to go a decade, they decided they better invest in engineers, and they established a program which WPI was part of. If you're accepted, you got your degree, fully accredited BS degree, in 3 years. No breaks, 1 week between Christmas and New Year's. That was it. Never could leave the campus except on weekends from noon Saturday to 5 o'clock Sunday, and 4 o'clock Wednesdays for some Navy tradition. But that was it. But one F, and you've got immediate transfer to the Pacific Fleet. There's a train that runs through Worcester. The only Amtrak train that runs through Worcester runs through at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And that ran in those days, still at 4 o'clock. And I had a roommate. In the morning, we got our grades at the end of the term. He got an F. I came back after lab in the afternoon. Blankets were rolled up, Navy style. I never saw him again. He was on the Amtrak or whatever it was, the New York Central in those days. And that's the way it was. Well, there were about 200 of us went in. And I think less than a third graduated. I was one of the lucky ones. So, got a commission, went to a school in Chicago to learn how to shoot a gun, because we didn't have any guns at WPI. And then went on destroyer in the Pacific Fleet. And we were preparing for the invasion of Japan. And the invasion of Japan was scheduled. Everybody knew it. The Japanese knew it. We knew it. Everybody knew it. And December 1st, 1945. And they were predicting 1 million casualties on each side. And historians today said that was about right. The Japanese were not going to surrender. And even the Pacific Islands did all jump off a cliff rather than surrender to the Allies. So that's what we had to look for. I never thought I was going to see the East Coast or home again. None of us did. And we kept drilling and preparing for the invasion of Japan. Then, on September 6th, Hiroshima disappeared. Atomic bomb won. About 6 days later, Nagasaki went off the map. Atomic bomb too. And on the 18th, over the incredibly strong resistance of all of the generals and admirals, the Emperor Hirohito surrendered the Empire of Japan to the Allied forces. The war was over. And then the colleges, which had been struggling along, with the exception of the engineering and V-12 colleges, the Air Force had a program too, but it wasn't as big, were flooded with veterans. The whole game changed is when the war ended. Veterans poured out. They all had the GI Bill, everything else. I came back and went to graduate school here, and because I had some good courses, I could teach some. So a number of us came back to WPI, and we taught and also got a master's degree. Then the Navy prediction was right. There was war, but not with Russia, with North Korea. So I was back in the Navy again for 3 more years, and I came back again. And I got assigned to the Mediterranean, which was much nicer. So the home port of Ville, France, you know, it's nice. But we came back again, and once you get back, I became an assistant professor somehow, and was here ever since. But the fraternities in those days really took a terrible beating, except those with the 12 units. Of course, people didn't like it. My neighbors back in the Berkshires thought it was a scandal. Their sons, which it was, were going off to war and injured, some were killed, and I was sitting in Worcester, Massachusetts, studying. So what the V-12 was called, they had all, navies called all their programs V for some reason. V-5, for example, was aviation. The V-12 was nicknamed by my friends back in my hometown, as everybody's friends back in their hometown, as victory in 12 years or fight. And so that was not a good thing. So I didn't go home anymore. But when we went in again, 3 more years in the Navy, came back and started teaching. And with the veterans were great students. They were all in a hurry. Some, with the president of the CAP one year, was a colonel. He was an officer in the CAP, but he also had his own B-29. And people like that with it. Some were a little strange because of what they now call post-traumatic syndrome. One guy, whose name I won't mention unless he is here, he went out and had a big dump truck full of bombs. This is after the war in Germany. Was told to take them out on this dam and dump them into the reservoir. And so he went on the dam, but he dumped them on the wrong side and blew up a couple of towns. But you had all these people in the fraternity. It was a very eclectic group of experiences and people. But most of them were great people. They understood comradeship, loyalty, mutual support. They were really ideal of fraternity brothers. And they were very, very well.